Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. So the president gave an address to the United Nations just moments ago, literally, as we're coming to you live, that focused primarily on Iran as far as a terror point goes, and it was very specific with Iran, also talking about the situation with Korea. I want to start with Korea, if we can, just for a moment here, because I want a juxtaposition. Last year, this was the president about North Korea at the United Nations.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do.
So that was his statement. Very strong, very direct. Got a lot of news on that one when he did it. Yep. This year, 1 year later, 12 months later, when it came to North Korea, take a listen.
I would like to thank Chairman Kim for his courage and for the steps he has taken, though much work remains to be done. The sanctions will stay in place until denuclearization occurs.
So here's what you've got. In the course of 12 months, it went from Rocket Man and what he was doing to an ongoing discussion. What's your read of that situation,
I think this
George?
is why the world has to continue to take America seriously as the world's superpower, that within 1 year, we have the ability, if we so choose, to diplomatically engage a country like North Korea, which is so isolated, and completely change the relationship, at least for now, and that we can use tough rhetoric. We can use Rocket Man-type rhetoric 1 year before, and then a year later, there's already been a summit in between. So it's not like there's an upcoming. In between that year of using that kind of tough language, basically any world leader, including the Iranians this week, they want to meet with the U.S. leader. They're the leader of the free world, regardless of who holds that office. It's the leader of the free world. And I think they see from our president that sign of strength, that ability to take the lead. And so because of that, I think it was, again, it just shows you the strength of America and what Donald Trump has tried to portray, again, as a country that we can take a stand in the world and the countries will come running to us to diplomatically engage.
Yes, so here's how I read it very similar. I think, and I want to get Harry's opinion on this. I think what you have is the president has strong rhetoric, strong talk. That's the way he deals with his diplomacy. He puts it on the line. He speaks as he is thinking about it and the way in which he articulates it. And then, but he's very calculating and very smart in the way it's handled, so that you can go into a 12-month period, Harry, from Rocket Man, call him Little Rocket Man there, Rocket Man to Chairman Kim.
Absolutely. So if you look at the North Korean experience, it suggests that President Trump's policy of remaining firm and confronting threats directly, in other words, his maximum pressure approach produces results, and that is good for the United States.
Than, quickly, you're our designated UN representative for the ECLJ. What was your sense?
What a difference in administrations, Jay. This is what happens when the United States of America leads with strength. If you move towards America, Jay, progress can be made. If you stand against America and America uses its strength, you better look out.
We've got a lot more ahead to discuss on this issue. The president gave a major speech at the UN, a lot of it focusing on the Middle East, and specifically Israel, Iran, and the whole region. We've got a petition up that says simply this: stop funding Israel's enemies. We encourage you to sign that. You can do that. There's a number on your screen. You can certainly do it there, or simply go to aclj.org. That's aclj.org to stand with Israel. We encourage you to do that today. Back with more in just a moment.
Millions of your taxpayer dollars are being funneled to jihadists at war with Israel. The terrorist-led Palestinian Authority uses $300 million a year to pay Palestinians carrying out terrorist attacks against Israel. We're paying for this. We funnel over $700 million taxpayer dollars to the Palestinian Authority and related entities each year. In fact, the UN has created a new $65 million taxpayer-funded anti-Israel slush fund to prop up the Palestinian Authority's legal war against Israel. This funding must end. We're aggressively fighting on Capitol Hill, at the United Nations, and in international courts to defend Israel. This is a critical moment. We need your voice now. Israel needs your voice now. Sign on to our petition. Stop funding terrorists at war with Israel. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
Hey, the president went to the United Nations, showed you the differential that he made regarding Korea, North Korea specifically. But he also set a theme. Not only was it about these dictators, but it was also about America's role in the world. Let's play number 22.
America will always choose independence and cooperation over global governance, control, and domination. I honor the right of every nation in this room to pursue its own customs, beliefs, and traditions. The United States will not tell you how to live or work or worship. We only ask that you honor our sovereignty in return.
The president is still making it clear that we're not leading from behind, but that we're not engaging in every global conflict either.
Absolutely. So one of the things that the president emphasized in his speech is that the rest of the world has to respect U.S. sovereignty, U.S. interests. The president of the United States is putting American citizens' interests first rather than the interest of global elites. And that is true in a number of arenas, including international trade and dealing, for instance, with Iran and the Iranian mullahs. He is not prepared to continue to send cash to Iran. He withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, and he has imposed sanctions on the Iranian regime. New sanctions take effect on November the 5th of 2018, and this is placing pressure on the Iranian leaders and the European globalists who continue to attempt to prop up the Iranian regime in contradistinction to supporting the Iranian people.
You know what's interesting about that is that there are reports that the Europeans are meeting to try to figure out ways around the sanctions. Because they know that if they got to make a choice between doing business with the United States or doing business with the Iranians, that's a very easy choice.
The report right now, and it's pretty general, but that the EU is going to put together some vehicle, as they're calling it, that all the funds would flow through that would somehow make these companies immune from U.S. sanctions, because most of them would also do business and have some financial transactions in the U.S. because of our banking system being so important in our stock market. So that they would create some vehicle that allows this work to, that allows them to continue to do business with Iran in violation of the U.S. sanctions, but somehow protects them. The truth is, though, is that the EU can try all at once. The corporations will have to make that decision. Most of the major corporations, as Harry's pointed out before this broadcast, and we talked about these sanctions, have decided they're not going to risk business with the U.S. or U.S. sanctions and having their assets frozen in the United States or any transaction that go through the United States to do business with a country that is large but not that big.
No reference to Turkey in there. You notice that?
Yeah.
I think that was intentional also. I think that there's a sensitive negotiations that are going on, and I think that was intentional. And they're, besides the fact that they're a NATO ally. But let me go to Than Bennett here. I'm going to play in a moment. The president used this phrase, America's policy of principled realism. So we're going to get that played in a moment. But before we do, Than, as our UN representative, when you go to the UN, you've been there many times on our behalf, usually on behalf of people being held captive for their faith, but on other issues as well. What is your sense of Capitol Hill's reaction? Are we seeing anything yet so far?
Not a whole lot, Jay. I think still digesting the speech, but I think here's what you're gonna hear, and this is certainly what I took away from it. For the first time in a long time, Jay, I heard a balanced approach with the United Nations that said two things that might seem to be in contradiction to each other, but actually work in harmony. On the one hand, you heard the president say, we're not going to meddle in your business when it's your sovereign right to engage on an issue. But on the other hand, Jay, he said, we're not going to be the world's pocketbook. So we're not going to fund every little program around the world that might not serve Americans' interests. We've seen this with repeated accounts. You talk about UNRWA, you talk about withdrawing from the Human Rights Council, you talk about reducing the UN's contributions. So, Jay, it was the president putting the world in a more appropriate posture, leading at the United Nations, but at the same time, not propping up everything. I loved this line, Jay. He said, going forward, we will only give to our friends. What a novel idea.
Yeah.
We're going to support those people who are our friends. And to Jordan's point, Jay, I don't think Europe better go down this line of trying to test the United States' resolve on that point.
Huge mistake. Now, interestingly, I like this line. I'm going to read it first, then I'm going to play it. The president says, that aim is advanced, not harmed, by acknowledging the obvious facts. America's policy of principled realism means we will not be held hostage to old dogmas, discredited ideologies, and so-called experts who have been proven wrong over the years, time and time again. Let's listen to it.
That aim is advanced, not harmed, by acknowledging the obvious facts. America's policy of principled realism means we will not be held hostage to old dogmas, discredited ideologies, and so-called experts who have been proven wrong over the years, time and time again.
You know, and the time and time again is important because let me give you, for instance, I'm going to play this bite in a moment, and this is about Jerusalem. The president made a very bold move in May of this year, moving the recognized embassy of the United States from Tel Aviv to Israel's eternal capital, Jerusalem. Now, there were a lot of previous advisors in previous administrations saying this was disastrous. This was going to start a third intifada. There's going to be a new war in the Middle East. Our allies will be angry. You cannot move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem without reshaping the world order. I mean, it was that significant, the way people, that's going to impact the entire Arab world, the entire Muslim world, and there'll be no way that this could be reconciled. All right, so what happens? The president moves the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And did the world collapse? Did the Middle East realignments get injured? No. Who are the allies of Israel right now in the region? Who would have thought this? Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and a number of the Gulf states. So taking Jerusalem off the table as a negotiating chip actually was really smart. So when the president engaged that issue, he knew exactly what it was going to do. It did advance the ball forward. Go ahead.
Well, and also those so-called experts thought that the best way to move forward with Palestinians was throwing money. Hundreds of millions of dollars, up to $1 billion a year at all of their programs. And you know what? It's gotten us nowhere over decades, like the president said. So we're not going to go by just the so-called experts. We're going to cut that funding. We recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. We cut off the funding of the Palestinians. And then we see what changes. It's all about taking new approaches. You don't always know exactly how things will turn out. I think with Jerusalem, that was a long-term decision. On the funding of the Palestinians, it's because what has happened in the past has failed. And how many decades of failure do you need on record before you tell the State Department we're not letting you do business as usual?
Well,
anymore?
let me play the Jerusalem one because I think this is very important. Number 37.
This year, we also took another significant step forward in the Middle East in recognition of every sovereign state to determine its own capital. I moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. The United States is committed to a future of peace and stability in the region, including peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
What the president did, though, and I think this is very significant, by moving the embassy to Jerusalem, all we recognized was the obvious. A sovereign nation gets to determine its capital. The United States, it's the District of Columbia. In Jerusalem, in Israel, it is Jerusalem. So we simply recognize what was under the law the right of the Israelis to do, and that they did do through their process. They determined where their capital was going to be. Now you take it to the next step, and as Jordan mentioned, the United Nations Relief Agency, which we think has been a scam on the UN and the American people. Billions of dollars for what is we went to court on this against the State Department and won, and started getting the reports and saw the fraud that was involved in this. And again, the president took, Harry, decisive action counter to decades of policy advice.
Absolutely. So the president's policy, in contradistinction to the prior administration's approach in the Middle East, has produced results. Today, if you look at the Middle East, it is quite different than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. It's important to note that many Arab nations are now working either covertly or directly with Israel. They face an immense threat from the Iranian Revolutionary Republic. In addition, the United States has placed pressure on the Palestinians. We will no longer fund their terror campaign, their pay-for-slay campaign. This is placing direct and unmistakable pressure on the Palestinian Authority and on Hamas. And so it's possible that the prior globalist consensus on the Middle East is falling apart.
Yeah. Why?
Because principled realism, when applied consistently, actually works.
So then on that point that Harry raised and the point that I mentioned, we talk about the UNRWA situation where we went to court to find out what Congress has been asking for a long time. And then you saw immediately, once the information started getting out, the administration taking action, including defunding some of these agencies to tunes of tens of millions of dollars.
Well, that's right, Jay. I mean, the Taylor Force Act defunded things going forward. With the UNRWA action that the administration took, Jay, they actually went backwards and took money that Congress had already sent to them and said, in light of this report and other factors, Jay, we're not going to send out funds that have already been obligated. So they went beyond what they had to do.
You know, I had the privilege of standing at that very podium the president was speaking from today at the United Nations on behalf of Israel during a major conference in the General Assembly on the BDS movement. Here's a little bit of it.
My grandfather, Sekulow, traveled from Russia in 1914 aboard a boat that took him past the Statue of Liberty. He was a fruit peddler in Brooklyn, New York. His grandson, me, I get to argue cases at the Supreme Court of the United States, in international tribunals, and now appear before you. It is humbling. In 2009, we opened our permanent office in Jerusalem. 1 year later, I found myself before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, the ICC. The Palestinian Authority, much like the BDS movement of today, sought to utilize an international tribunal for one purpose, and one purpose only: to delegitimize the Jewish state of Israel. I argued the law, and the law was clear. The Palestinian Authority was not a state. It had no business being before the ICC, and the case must be dismissed. 2 years later, that law was established and the court did dismiss that action. That's a victory, but the fact of the matter is, BDS is the flip side of that same coin. We call it lawfare, utilizing the legal system to delegitimize a people or a group.
We've got a petition up that says simply this: stop funding Israel's enemies. We encourage you to sign that. You can do that. There's a number on your screen. You can certainly do it there, or simply go to aclj.org. That's aclj.org to stand with Israel. We encourage you to do that today. Back with more in just a moment.
Millions of your taxpayer dollars are being funneled to jihadists at war with Israel. The terrorist-led Palestinian Authority uses $300 million a year to pay Palestinians carrying out terrorist attacks against Israel. We're paying for this. We funnel over $700 million taxpayer dollars to the Palestinian Authority and related entities each year. In fact, the UN has created a new $65 million taxpayer-funded anti-Israel slush fund to prop up the Palestinian Authority's legal war against Israel. This funding must end. We're aggressively fighting on Capitol Hill, at the United Nations, and in international courts to defend Israel. This is a critical moment. We need your voice now. Israel needs your voice now. Sign on to our petition. Stop funding terrorists at war with Israel. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
All right, last segment of the broadcast. We take your calls on any topic. Let's go right to them.
I think we'll start with Joy in Alabama on line 3. Joy, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Joy. Go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to say that today when I listened to the president's speech, what I heard him say was to all people that we should all be like a sovereign nation, that we should be proud of our cultures, and that we should be able to live our lives. And I like that he leveled it, not just that we're better or they're worse or
no, it's to respect the sovereignty of the various countries, but he also at the same time he said that and he meant that. And I think that's a good strategy and a good policy. But he also put on notice Syria that if you use let's get this soundbite ready. So while he wanted to respect sovereignty and wanted to understand that we're not going to be stuck by old dogmas and failed policies, when it came down to Syria and red lines and chemical weapons, this president was unapologetic in the way in which he put that forward. So when you look at that, you look at what he said about Syria in that context, it was very direct. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
The ongoing tragedy in Syria is heartbreaking. Our shared goals must be the de-escalation of military conflict, along with a political solution that honors the will of the Syrian people. In this vein, we urge the United Nations-led peace process be reinvigorated, but rest assured the United States will respond if chemical weapons are deployed by the Assad regime.
So the red line is chemical weapons. He's already taken action when that's happened in the past, but he also said the will of the people of Syria to be fulfilled.
Yeah, so I think that is to make sure that they have representation that is not Iranian mullah-led, that is not necessarily the Assad regime, that the U.S., we know this is one of the most complicated conflicts ongoing right now in the world. We have basically eliminated, I think as the president said, 85% of ISIS. So ISIS is playing a less important role, but that vacuum has been filled by others like Iran and Russia, who are backing strongly the Assad regime. Can you get to actual peace and prosperity and a back to even a Syria that can be rebuilt while that is ongoing? No, you cannot. I mean, there's still massive civil war, destruction of entire towns, cities, not just villages, by the way, cities, major infrastructure completely wiped out. So I think it's a long-term strategy that has to look at, one, our interest, and then two, the interest of the Syrian people, but being cautious when you do that, because right now, I mean, there are still a lot of factions there, even outside the Assad regime, that are pretty dangerous.
Harry, what was your reaction to the president on the Syria issue? His entire speech theme was respect sovereignty, but he clearly laid down a marker as it relates to Syria, that another utilization of chemical weapons will be met with action.
Absolutely. So it's clear that the use of chemical weapons is a violation of international law, but equally clear, the president is emphasizing something that the prior administration could not, and that is the president is a man of his word. This sends a clear and unmistakable message to both our enemies and allies alike, so that there are clear red lines going forward. I think Jordan is absolutely correct. The Syrian situation is very, very complex with Iran, with Russia, and other groups involved in Syria. But it's also important that we send a message to Syria, that we send a message to Russia, that there are red lines. That is helpful in protecting one of our allies, Israel, going forward. So I think the president, again, has emphasized that he is a man of his word, and that's very, very important going forward.
Let's go right back to the phones. Shirley in Florida, online too. Shirley, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Shirley. You're on the air.
Hi. It's great to talk to you guys. I really love everything you do for all of us.
Thank you
very much.
Yep.
I thought the speech that he made was fabulous, and it's about time that the whole world stepped up and did their part in keeping peace on the planet. And I'm really disappointed I never hear anything from China or Russia in support of all this. Why are we not hearing anything?
Look, I mean, it was a muted response on China and Russia because there's the bilateral, trilateral negotiations going on here. And I think look, when you only have 40 minutes to speak, so I think the president went about 40 minutes. That is, there's only so much you can cover. So, but that doesn't mean there's not meetings going on. But it's not so much what they say, Than. It's also what these countries actually do.
Well, and it's also what we do behind the scenes as well, Jay. I mean, look, the president has been very consistent with his call, not only for contributions to the UN, but also contributions to other programs. And let me just give one small example. There is a program called the UN Development Program, which is supposed to support something that Jordan was talking about, the resettlement of refugees who have been displaced by ISIS and others. Jay, this administration has told the rest of the world, I'm pulling back a big contribution that the United States is making to that program because you all aren't supporting it as you should. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to send it directly to the Christian and Yazidi communities that have been displaced by this. That is a way he has backed up the words he gave today, Jay, with action on the ground. So as it relates to China, if they don't come to the table and contribute in a like fashion, the president will just keep pulling the United States dollars back and allocating them directly.
We're able to talk to you about a lot of these issues. Like I said, I've had the privilege of being at that podium at the General Assembly. I've appeared before the Office of the Prosecutor at the UN, at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, presenting Israel's interest before the ICC. So I've done this. It was interesting that the president had this statement. The Iranian people, again, this is drawing a distinction between the Iranian regime and the Iranian people, are rightly outraged that their leaders have embezzled billions of dollars from Iran's treasury. Let me play for you soundbite 31.
The Iranian people are rightly outraged that their leaders have embezzled billions of dollars from Iran's treasury, seized valuable portions of the economy, and looted the people's religious endowments, all to line their own pockets and send their proxies to wage war. Not good.
That is from the President of the United States speaking at the United Nations. Strong words on the Iranian regime. Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast. Again, we've got a petition that's up right now, and we encourage you to really be part of it. And that is, we shouldn't be sending our taxpayer dollars to those that are harming or intending to harm Israel. The enemies of Israel should not be funded by the United States or, frankly, the United Nations. You can join that petition at aclj.org or call the number that's on your screen to stand with Israel, aclj.org. Again, that does it for the broadcast this week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Millions of your taxpayer dollars are being funneled to jihadists at war with Israel. The terrorist-led Palestinian Authority uses $300 million a year to pay Palestinians carrying out terrorist attacks against Israel. We're paying for this. We funnel over $700 million taxpayer dollars to the Palestinian Authority and related entities each year. In fact, the UN has created a new $65 million taxpayer-funded anti-Israel slush fund to prop up the Palestinian Authority's legal war against Israel. This funding must end. We're aggressively fighting on Capitol Hill, at the United Nations, and in international courts to defend Israel. This is a critical moment. We need your voice now. Israel needs your voice now. Sign on to our petition. Stop funding terrorists at war with Israel. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.